Y'all, sublimation can be one of those daunting things, and honestly, so many things can go wrong. However, I'm here today to give you my 30 sublimation tips that I wish I would have known before I started my sublimation journey. So if this is you, stick around, and if you have some great things that you do, tips, tricks, or anything that helps you get a perfect result at the end, make sure you leave it down below, because we love hearing what you do. We love sharing knowledge and making sure that all crafters know those little tips and tricks to get that sublimation just perfect. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. The very first tip, and actually this is gonna go with the first 3 tips that I have, is making sure that you are using quality products. And that is across the board. You wanna make sure you have a really good high quality printer, whether that is an Epson printer, a Sawgrass printer, a Brother. All of those sublimation printers are great, or even a converted Epson EcoTank. Those are the types of printers that you're going to want to gravitate toward because they are tested, they have proven that they are great printers, and especially the ones that are already set up ready for sublimation, those are going to be super beginner friendly, super high quality. You're gonna pay a little bit more on the front end for those, but just know that those are already set up for you to go. But making sure you have a quality printer is going to make a difference. Before, we had an Epson Workforce printer, which was a great printer, but because it was a cartridge printer, it was so hard to convert, so hard to refill. And honestly, I just think either getting a printer that is already set up for sublimation or converting an Epson EcoTank is going to be the easiest on you and the best way to go. With that being said, to piggyback off of that, if you're gonna have a quality printer, you also need to use quality ink. So if you have an Epson SureColor, which is the printer that's already made for sublimation, my suggestion is to use Epson ink in that Epson printer. In the SureColor printer, let me back up and be clear, Epson ink, Epson sublimation ink in the Epson SureColor printer. That way you do not void your warranty. Same thing with Sawgrass. If I bought a Sawgrass printer and they sent Sawgrass sublimation ink, that's what I'm gonna use together. Now, if you are going to convert an Epson EcoTank printer, whether that be the smaller one or the 8550, our favorite brands are going to be either Hippo ink or Cosmos ink. Now, if you do get the Epson 8550, I do love that the Cosmos ink does come with the photo black, because there are 6 different colors instead of your normal 4 in a printer. With the Epson 8550, the Cosmos ink does come with all 6 colors, including the gray and the photo black. So I would go gravitate towards Cosmos if you have the Epson ET 8550, or you can choose if you want Cosmos, Hippo. Either one of those are great for the smaller printer. So using a quality ink, writing down what brand you use so you remember is going to be key, because you are not going to want to change inks when you refill, because different inks have different formulations. So making sure you record what inks you use, whether it be Cosmos, Epson, Sawgrass, Hippo, any of those are great. Record it, write it down. The next tip that I have is to always regularly keep a check on your ink levels in your printer. You need to always make sure you check it, because sometimes those ink levels will drop if you have printed, you didn't notice, and then if you go to print again, you may not have enough ink in a certain color. So always checking those colors are great if you are having time in between printing. On top of that, while we are speaking on printing and checking your ink levels, the regularity of the times you print is also going to be important. You want to regularly print on your sublimation printer. That is going to help keep those print heads nice and filled with ink. They're not going to dry out. If you don't print regularly with your sublimation printer, especially converted printers, there is a really good chance that that ink is going to sit in that print head. It's like a sponge, and it could dry up. So you want to make sure you're constantly running that old ink out, putting new ink in those print heads, and just going ahead and printing at least once every week, maybe once every 2 weeks. I feel like that might be pushing it. But the good thing about it is even if you're not pressing something, you can go ahead and print to maintain the quality of your printer and save those designs to be pressed on a blank later. While we're talking about printing, if you didn't know already, all images that you print and press are going to have to be mirrored. So either making a note on your printer that says, or on your computer, or going ahead and creating a preset for your printer that automatically mirrors your design is going to be key. Now, if you have a printer that is made for sublimation, whether that is the Epson EcoTank, the Sawgrass, any of those printers, they may already have a setting where it mirrors the design for you. Ask me how I know, because when we first got our Epson EcoTank, I printed it and clicked mirror my design, and I think I did it 5 different times, not understanding what I was doing wrong. What happened was I was used to working with converted printers, and I would always have to mirror it manually. If a printer is already set up to be a sublimation printer, there's a good chance that it already automatically mirrors it for you. So check that. Create a preset that has a mirror automatically on. That way, when you go to print, all you have to do, click the printer and select the preset that you have already created. My next tip for you all is going to be when it comes to pressing. And I don't know how else to say this other than you're gonna have to memorize rote memorization, memorize times and temperatures that sublimation works best at. Now, because this is a change in property, so it's going from a solid to a gas back to a solid, there is going to be a temperature range that this can only happen. So this is not going to happen below 365, 70 degrees. You might get a faint hint of it, but it's not really going to happen. Your sweet spot for sublimation is going to live between 375, 380 to around 400. Now, there are some blanks that are going to require the heat to be higher, but memorizing that little bit right there, knowing that sublimation works between 375 and 400 is really going to help you get the best results every single time, even on those blanks that aren't made for sublimation, but you know it's possible to sublimate, and maybe they don't have instructions that come with them to sublimate on it. Knowing that general range, that generally speaking, you're gonna wanna do 380 to 385 for about 40 to 60 seconds, depending on the blank, that's going to help you eliminate so much trial and error if you are trying to sublimate on something that is not, quote, sublimation ready. While we're talking about blanks, let's talk about the importance of pre-pressing your blanks, because that is something that I really, really wish that I knew sooner. So garments specifically will sometimes hold moisture, and pre-pressing does is it allows that moisture to leave the fabric that you are pressing on, and all that is going to do is ensure that you have a very crisp, nice, clean press when it comes to pressing. Another thing that pre-pressing your designs is going to help, especially if you are doing garments, it's going to help you get those wrinkles out. It's just really going to prepare your blank the way that it needs to be prepared in order for you to get the best results. Speaking of pressing, another thing that you definitely need to avoid, and these next 2 tips are very important, you need to try to avoid over pressing or overheating, and then also avoid underheating. Remember that range that I gave you that sublimation works best, around 375 to let's say 400 at the top. Unless a blank is made to withstand high heats, if you go over 400, more than likely you're gonna get a yellowing effect, and that's going to give you what we call a burnt blank. So it's going to kind of burn the fibers, the design, it's going to make it look, give it a yellow look to it, a sepia look, and that's going to be way too much heat, so you know you have overheated your design. If you have underheated or not had enough heat, you might get just a very, very faint or no transfer at all. that is going to tell you that you need to up your temperature. So making sure that you don't underheat or overheat is also very, very important. The next tip that I have for you is going to be focused around your design on your blank and making sure that it stays secure. So if you are pressing something or sublimating on something, and you have what we like to call our sublimation sandwich. So we have our base layer here. Now this is like a spongy rubber mat that we have on the base of our metal plate. Then what I would do is place my shirt, my design, butcher's paper, press. That's what I like to call the sublimation sandwich. However, when it comes to placing my design, you would think that because this is a flat, immovable surface, what's the point of taping a design down when I'm just going to move this and nothing else moves? It is very, very important that you go ahead and adhere your design down, whether it is using heat tape or using a sublimation adhesive spray, because what that does is that ensures that your print stays touching your blank no matter what it is, and that means that the process, the sublimation process, the design goes straight to the blank. So if you didn't know how sublimation worked, let me break it down really quickly for you. So what happens in the sublimation process is you print your design, and we'll go overhead. You can see this, the lightness of these colors, we're not going to worry about that right now, but you can see this ink is a solid, right? So what happens is this solid ink, once you place it under heat and pressure, the pressure is just as important as the heat. Once you place this under heat and pressure, those solid molecules then turn into a gas. Because of the heat and pressure, the solid then turns into a gas. Basic science, when it's a solid, your molecules sit beside of each other right here. When it is turned into a gas, gas particles bounce off of each other, okay? So as it turns into a gas, these gas particles start bouncing off of each other. Why it is important that our print touches our blank and is adhered down with either heat tape or sublimation spray is because what that allows those gas particles to do is they kind of don't bounce as much. They are going to bounce just a little bit until they touch the polymer in the, let's say, a polyester shirt, some type of whatever substrate you are using. That gas is going to, when it comes in touch with that polymer, it's like it's got glue all over it and it sticks. So when they're close together, those gas particles don't have anywhere to go. They can only go from the solid gas to the polymer, okay? So that's why it is important that we have our blank taped or adhered down. If you do not have it taped or adhered down, those gas particles start bouncing off and having like a little dance party, and they go wherever they want. That's where you're going to see ghosting. That's how ghosting occurs, because those little gas particles danced out of boundaries and dispersed somewhere else. That's why it is so important to take your print, adhere it down with heat tape or adhesive spray. That way those molecules can't dance away from where you want them. My next tip is going to be talking about blanks. So let's talk about blanks for a minute. Most of the time, when you are purchasing blanks, if you are creating sublimation things, you're probably going to look up sublimation tumbler, sublimation shirt, sublimation whatever, fill in the blank. However, if you do your research ahead of time, a lot of times you can find different blanks to use that are not marketed as sublimation, and you can actually find them cheaper. So all you need to look for is something that has polymer coated, or if you are doing a garment, you need a high polyester count or a high synthetic fiber count, and that is what is going to tell you if it is sublimatable or not. Now, while we're on blanks, my next little tip, if you've done your research, you're thinking, oh, I definitely can sublimate on that. The materials look like it's good to go, but for some reason it doesn't. let's say a whiteboard, for example, would be a really good example because some of them are sublimation ready, some of them are not. My next tip is, did you know that by adding a laminating sheet to a blank, you can then sublimate on it? It is super easy, especially because laminating sheets will adhere to just about any surface, and it doesn't take a high temperature to get that to adhere. So if you run into something and let's say you did your research, but for some reason it's not sublimating onto it right, slap you on a laminating sheet on that blank, make sure you press it, adhere that down, and then you should be able to sublimate on it, no problem. My next tip for you, if you haven't started your sublimation journey yet, is to check out that first link down below with Maker's Gonna Sublimate. Y'all, this is gonna be a shameless plug, and I don't care because we spent so many hours building our sublimation course to make you learning this process so easy and so streamlined. When I tell you I spent a full week getting color profiles perfect for that course, I'm not joking, and it's not just me. There was so many people in our office working on making sure that course was perfect for you all. We do updates. On top of that, if you purchase the course, you get 600 plus sublimation files ready. And I promise you, I guarantee that the money that you spend on this course to help you become a sublimation pro, you are going to save that amount of money in blanks alone. We went through, no lie, 2 boxes full of Cricut mugs, the sublimation mugs, 2 boxes full of those when we were trying to create the color profiles for the Epson, the Eco Tank that we converted. I went through, it took me a week or so and went through, I couldn't tell you how many license plates, luggage tags, so many things I went through trying to get the color profiles right on the ET8550. I promise you, you're gonna save the amount of money that you spend on this course in blanks alone. So, shameless plug, check out Maker's Gonna Sublimate. We walk you through the process, step by step, hand in hand. You get it for a lifetime, but that is definitely a big tip that I have for beginners, is allow someone to help you along this journey instead of doing it on your own, because I do feel like if you don't know what you're doing, this process is one that can become super frustrating, super quick, because in general, printers are not really fun to work with, especially when things go wrong. So, shameless plug, check out Maker's Gonna Sublimate. The next tip that I have for you guys is to make sure that your workspace or your work area stays free of dust and debris, and you just keep a nice clean area where you are sublimating. Now, the reason that I say that is because sometimes particles can get stuck in fabrics that you may be sublimating on. So you just want to keep the area clean, because sometimes those particles will change colors when you press your blank, especially if you do not lint roll, which leads me to my next tip. So the last tip was keeping your work area clean, which leads me to my next tip, and that is when you are sublimating, always try to lint roll your blank. That is just to get those dust particles off of that so that you don't open up your press and you see random colors from little fibers that were not supposed to be there. My next tip is talking about color profiles. You heard me talking about color profiles earlier and how long it took us to figure those out. So if you are not getting the colors that you want, downloading and installing that advanced print driver onto your computer and then going over to those advanced color options and getting the right color profile is going to be very, very important, especially for converted printers. A lot of times what happens is there will be one color that really outshines another one. One great example is if you are printing and sublimating pictures of people, individuals, I've noticed that sometimes the magenta gets bumped up really high and people come out looking like a lobster. So you do have to play around with those color profiles. Once again, if you're curious what our favorite color profiles are, check out Maker's Gonna Sublimate. Also, a little tip for those who want to know, all these different inks, all these different ink brands, they do have their own color profiles, and you can find those color profiles on the ink brand's website. Next up comes to talking about storing your materials. You really want to make sure that you are storing your sublimation paper, your inks, everything that you're going to be using, storing them in a place that has low light and low moisture. You do not want these inks do not need to be subjected to a lot of sunlight or a lot of light, so keep them in a dark, dry place. Same thing with your sublimation paper. This doesn't really matter as far as light goes. You just want to make sure that your paper does stay in a very dry area. While we're on the subject of light, after you have created your sublimation project, whatever you are creating, you really want to try to avoid keeping that specific thing that you have created or sublimated. You do not want it to be in direct sunlight. Now, you might have noticed this, especially with these sublimation stickers. A lot of people were creating car bumper stickers. Those are great. Just know if you do that, because those stickers are in direct sunlight and in heat, just like if you were to place too much heat on this press and press it, what is it going to do? It's going to yellow, it's going to fade, it's going to turn over time. Same thing for those stickers or whatever you create. If it is exposed to a lot of light, if it is exposed to a lot of heat, it is going to turn and it is going to change and possibly fade over time. So whatever you create, try your best to keep it out of direct sunlight, or if you are creating sublimation stickers for a car decal, just know that you're probably going to have to switch it out at least every summer or so. My next sublimation tip for you guys is using a convection oven to sublimate on tumblers, mugs, or some type of cup versus a mug or tumbler press. Now, hear me out. I love using the convection oven for that, strictly because I can fit multiple tumblers or multiple cups in this at one time. Whereas if you are using a tumbler or mug press, you can only do one at a time. So I do love the convection oven for that purpose, but to piggyback off of that tip, if you use the sublimation oven to sublimate onto some type of cup, remember when I said that it has to have its heat plus pressure that gives us that really good sublimated look? If you are doing it in the convection oven, it's hard for you to get that pressure. You can wrap the cup and you can tape it as best as you can, but for some reason, there's always gonna be a little bit of separation. So to alleviate that, what you can do is purchase these little silicone wraps from Amazon. They come in a variety of sizes. So this one is a mug wrap. I'll semi-wrap it around this to show you what it does. So it wraps around your mug. These go underneath the handles of your mug and they snap together to keep that design that you have printed on your blank. Now, they have multiple different ones. Like I said, this is one for a mug. They make them for large tumblers, so you can fully wrap your tumbler and keep that on there. They have different sizes. They have tapered tumblers. You can see here is like a tapered tumbler. Lots of different sizes that you can choose from. So my tip is, if you are going to sublimate in a convection oven, which by the way, you can find these at the thrift store for like next to nothing. If you do find a French door one at a thrift store or a secondhand store, get it immediately. But if you are gonna do that for your cups or tumblers, also go ahead and invest. And these are super cheap from Amazon. I'd say at most $15 to $20, and they're reusable. And use these on your tumblers and cups, because I promise it's going to make a huge difference. Now, another thing while we're talking about this, and it reminds me, my next tip, get a really good pair of heat gloves. There are some heat gloves out there, and I'm gonna call them out on Amazon. I know we have a pair, I'm gonna find them. these guys. They come in pink and they come in green. These heat gloves are fine. They get the job done, but I have burnt my hands on these more times than once. Get you a pair of really good, thick heat gloves, because I promise you, when you sublimate, it's gonna be so, so hot. So this is just to help you. Don't cheap out on your heat gloves, get you some good ones. My next little tip for you guys is using a heat gun to spot sublimate. Did you know you could do that? Now, this is not something that we recommend very frequently. However, if you are, let's say, creating a full wrap design, but you somehow have a gap. We did this on a terrazzo pattern tumbler once before, where we just cut out a piece of that terrazzo pattern, taped it where we had a gap, and then you can take the heat gun, hold it up next to that spot, try your best not to destroy or hurt any of the areas around it, but you can spot sublimate with a heat gun. Who would have ever thunk it? I love it. Definitely let me know if you try this tip out. Next up, let's talk pressing pillows. Why do we need them? Why do we want them? So these are going to come in very, very handy, especially if you have blanks that you want to get the design kind of wrapped around the edge. If you have a rounded edge design, a really good example could be an arabesque tile or possibly a coaster. So many different things that you can use for this. These are also really good for ceramics. Using a pressing pillow for specific blanks is going to be very, very helpful. Now, once again, this is going to be a tip within a tip, guys. So if you're writing notes, take this down. If you are pressing ceramics, did you know that you can press from the back? That is why if I'm doing ceramics, like coasters and tiles for ornaments, I like to pre-press my pillow, get it hot. That way, when I flip my design over, I actually do pillow, sublimation design, ceramic piece, and then I press. That way, that design hugs around the edge of the coaster or the ceramic piece. And the heat plate, when you are sublimating ceramics, you have to sublimate for about 4 to 5 minutes. So what happens is it heats that ceramic up from the bottom and goes through and still gives you a flawless result on the top of your ceramic coaster or tile, whatever you are creating. My next tip, and this is going to be kind of a simple, almost a no-brainer, and that is using sublimation paper to get the best results. So of course if you're new to sublimation, you think you have to use sublimation paper. Funny story, you don't have to use sublimation paper, just so you know. However, to get the best results, I still think using the sublimation paper, because it allows more ink to be absorbed onto it, is still going to give you a better result. So in a pinch, you can use copy paper, but for best results, sublimation paper is the way to go. Next up, let's talk about Teflon sheets and the importance of Teflon sheets. So I wish I would have known earlier how important these can be to make sure that your designs and your blanks don't burn or get hurt. It would have saved so many things. So remember me talking about a sublimation sandwich. We have our blank, we have our print, we have our butcher's paper. What butcher's paper does is butcher's paper absorbs the moisture. Just like if a butcher was actually using it in a butcher shop, they wrap the meats in butcher's paper because it absorbs the extra moisture. Same thing. However, you can still use an extra layer of Teflon, and what that is going to do is that is going to protect the other parts of the blank that may not be covered by butcher's paper, and it's going to help prevent melting and or burning. Teflon really, really does help. I don't always use it 100% of the time, but if I have a very delicate substrate or a delicate blank that I do not want to mess up, I will grab my Teflon sheet and I will use that to help me save my blank. The next tip that I have for you is to document. What I mean by that is when you are sublimating, if you get great results, if something goes wrong, keep a notebook and document everything that you do. That way you know if you're going to go press the exact same blank again 2 or 3 months down the road, you can refer back to your notebook and see what worked and what didn't work. So that's why I always suggest keeping a notebook with all of your equipment and writing down times and temperatures and what works and what doesn't. The next couple tips that I have do refer to your computer when it comes to sublimating and creating mock-ups. So first tip that I have is for you to create digital mock-ups of your designs so that you can see what they look like before you go to press. Because once you have pressed, it's done. You can't undo it. So using and taking advantage of digital mock-ups and really getting an idea of what you want it to look like before you do and complete the sublimation process is really going to ensure that your designs come out looking flawless every single time. This is also going to be very important, especially if you find a blank that has a high polyester count that is not white that you still want to sublimate on. Another tip that I really want to make sure you guys know and are aware of is that you really need to think of color theory when you are deciding what to put on different types of substrates or different blanks. So for example, let's say you have a heathered salmon t-shirt that has a 65% polyester count. Because it is a salmon pink color, you're gonna have to think of, okay, what's not gonna show up? Okay, no pinks are gonna show up. No yellows are gonna show up. If you have blue, because it is a pink color, it may come out looking kind of purple. If it is green, it may come out looking a little bit different. There's just so many things that you have to think about. So if you are trying to press on a colored shirt, think about color theory, because your ink and your sublimation ink and what you transfer is see-through. There is no white backing, so you have to make sure whatever you press on, the colors in your design are going to show up. Last but not least is one to do with your computer screen and making sure that the colors that you see on your computer screen are similar to the colors that you will get printed out. So I'm going to show you how you can actually calibrate your computer screen to make sure you have similar colors to what you're going to get when you print your design. So to calibrate your screen, what you're going to do is you're going to come to your system preferences, whether you're on a Mac or a PC, you're going to go to your system preferences or settings. From there, you're going to go to your displays. And once your displays have been pulled up, if you'll go over to color, you can see over here on the right side, there are plenty of profiles to choose from here. But all I'm going to do is I'm just going to calibrate the current profile I'm on. We're going to click through here. You want to make sure that your brightness is turned all the way up. Continue. And then continue, and it will calibrate. Now, I had already calibrated mine, so it didn't show up a lot of difference, but this will help you ensure that the color you see on your screen will be the color that is printed. Whew! That's been a lot of tips and tricks when it comes to sublimation. I hope there is one thing that you have learned from this video. If I missed some other tips and tricks that you think should be included, make sure you comment down below. Or if there's something you've learned, I love to hear what you have learned from our videos. So please comment that down below, engage. We'll respond to you guys. If you haven't already, hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to our channel, and hit that bell notification so that you can be notified every time we get crafty. Also, if you haven't already and you're curious, check out Maker's Gonna Sublimate. I promise you, it's gonna be worth your time. And if you're ready to learn more about sublimation, check out this video here.